how do we think about talent in the workplace, and really recognizing the only way a business gets off the ground is the talent in which surrounds the business.
You know, the future of brick and mortar is definitely going to be very much experience first rather than retail first or transaction first. And few things, what we are seeing is how companies are using their physical footprint to create a real-time experience.
Our mission, which is to enable deeper, longer, and more meaningful relationships between people and their pets. We do this through exceptional quality dog food, rooted in veterinary science.
I'm Richard Gearhart.
And I'm Elizabeth Gearhart. You've just heard some excerpts from today's show, and it was dynamite. So stay tuned for the rest.
I'm Richard Gearhart.
And I'm Elizabeth Gearhart.
Welcome to Passage to Profit, the show that's all about entrepreneurs, innovation, and the intellectual property that helps them flourish. Tonight on the show, we have Jen Thornton. She's amazing, and she's the head and CEO of 304 Coaching, which helps create high-performance teams for entrepreneurs. So you definitely won't miss that. And after Jen, we're going to have Ashish Toshniwal, who actually received an email from Steve Jobs early in his career. And he is the co-founder and CEO of Y Media Labs, and he's going to have a lot of very interesting information. So stay tuned.
And for all of you dog lovers out there, I know that's half the country, and half the world at least. Renaldo Webb has something you really want to find out about for your dogs.
Yes, but before we get to our distinguished guests, we have IP in the news, which is, of course, as an intellectual property attorney, one of my favorite things.
Do you remember Evel Knievel?
I certainly do. I went and saw him when I was a kid.
So he was a daredevil.
I almost got his autograph, but I think he was like not able to get up off the ground or something.
He would do stuff. He would dress in this jumpsuit and like ride his motorcycle over cars and canyons and I don't know what
all sorts of stuff, but it like took forever. You'd be there in the audience and it would take him like 40 minutes to warm up, and then he'd kind of ride up to the top of the ramp, and then he'd ride down. He'd ride his motorcycle around because he only had one thing, which is, and once the jump was over, like it's done, right? So he dragged it out as long as he could.
Anyway, he was very well known. And what, in the 70s was it?
Yeah, 70s and 80s, yeah.
And then his son, though, has recently sued Disney because they had a character in Toy Story 4 called Duke Kaboom, who was similar to Evel Knievel in a lot of ways, but had some differences. One being he was Canadian. Duke Kaboom is Canadian. Well, no, Evel Knievel was American.
So this is a cartoon character, right?
Yes.
Okay, so they had a cartoon character with a guy wearing a white jumpsuit like Evel Knievel, riding a motorcycle, and I guess jumping over stuff, right? And so
I didn't see Toy Story 4.
His son thought that I guess that this was a representation of his father, and he sued based on trademark infringement, and he lost
because Disney changed it enough was the ruling,
right? And they changed his facial hair, and he was Canadian. And those were the reasons that it was not considered infringing. So anyway, you know, you can't beat Disney. I mean, let's face it, Evel Knievel against Disney, Evel Knievel's son against Disney. Oh, give me a break. Okay.
But now we're going to move on to an actual issued patent. We are taping this in early October with the hopes that it will air around Halloween.
Yes.
And I believe this man wrote his own patent application, and he actually got his patent through, which is very unusual. It may be that he's a patent attorney or something, but his name is Frank P. Becking from Redwood City, California. This issued August 17th, 2004.
And August 17th is her birthday, by the way, for people who want to send presents.
And that's when I was born, was too. But anyways, he most patent applications and patents are extremely dry and legalese.
Oh, come on.
Not this one.
They're fascinating.
So his abstract is a face with glowing eyes returns stare or blinks at onlookers. So it's like a little ghost thing for Halloween, a little mechanical ghost thing with LEDs for eyes. But
I guess back in the day, when was this? 2002 too. That was considered a creative idea.
when he first wrote it, right?
Yeah.
So the creature has a pair of empty sockets or under evil brows is where the eyes go.
Right.
And he says the approach to prop construction described may also be employed for less sinister purposes.
Right. So
Which you would never see that.
The
in
title of the
Random
patent is Haunting Aid, and I guess you're supposed to use this.
to haunt people.
Well, of course, but it's like if your movie isn't scary enough, then you're supposed to get one of these and put it in the room while you're watching the movie,
Right.
and that way you'll be like double scared.
So in the background, he talks about other apparatus like this that are like scary things with mechanical or electrical features. But then he says, unfortunately, one needs to be a grave robber in order to afford the lit-up props available today. The present invention is poised to kill this trend. The invention may even be useful in producing mass hysteria.
Which we all need more of, let's
It may
be
also
honest.
find use for other festive occasions, but with different effect.
So this is sort of patent person humor here, because just in case you're not following, but he goes on to say the present invention includes heads, portions of heads, or faces depicted on inexpensive panels, sheets, or layers of material with light emitting diodes positioned to simulate eyes. When it may be preferred in many instances, the heads not need to be dismembered.
So you may want a dismembered head, but it doesn't have to be.
Accordingly, the invention may include complete, if often somewhat decayed or devoured figures with glowing eyes. So he's really setting the stage there. You can just gross people out to your heart's content, and the invention will accomplish its purpose.
So he was just hilarious. So we thought that was funny because you never see that kind of language in that. But obviously he had to do it himself, because I don't think a patent attorney would.
So now it's time for Richard's Roundtable, where our distinguished guests have the opportunity to comment on what they just heard. So if you have thoughts about either of the patents or the patent or the case, or just any other intellectual property topic, please fire away. So we'll go to Jen Thornton first. Jen, tell us what you think.
Well, I'm thinking that Evel Knievel's brother or son may have a case against the ghost, because the ghost is described as evil and he's in a white suit. And I think that's the next lawsuit, is Evel Knievel's son going after the ghost.
There you go.
I think that's hilarious. I hope his son is listening and receives some strategic advice there. Thanks a lot. Kenya, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was kind of sad to hear about the Disney situation and Evel Knievel's son, because I feel like they were very intentful in terms of how they switched things around to kind of get around the whole, using of likeness, I guess, or using someone's likeness. I feel like they made the character Canadian on purpose. Like they did all these little tricky things to kind of manipulate the situation. So it is Disney, but, I was kind of sad to kind of hear that they are really taking people's ideas, but haven't been. Allegedly, we'll say allegedly.
Allegedly. Well, that resonates with me too. I mean, Disney could have done something for this guy, right? And or at least somehow acknowledged that it was based on fame that somebody else had spent their lives creating, right?
Maybe bought a license or something. I'm sure if you use any Disney stuff, you have to buy a license to do it. So
yeah, I mean that's
sure.
a very thoughtful.
And I guess my question to you, Richard, is what could his son, Evel Knievel's son, have done to maybe protect the likeness a little better? Like how far can someone go, I guess, in the trademarking process to protect themselves? So, or can they not?
No, it's pretty hard. You can kind of work out a series potentially of copyrights. Copyrights are often used to protect cartoon characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even Knievel was a person. So it's, if he had a custom suit made, maybe a design patent, but those kinds of things are tough to protect, and you really have to invest a lot. And Evel Knievel when he was famous, there was only one Evel Knievel, right? So he was like, I don't know that he really ever thought about protecting his brand beyond that in those days, but certainly nowadays you would think about it. So, but a good question. It's hard to do for sure. So, Ashish, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's I remember when we tried our first startup. This was 2007-8. We got a patent infringement letter that whatever we were building is very close to, and it was like a deal website, and since then, like, I realized unless you have a very solid case, it's always hard to establish the case, and it feels like that's the case here too.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting that you got a cease and desist letter early on. I mean, do you mind explaining how that resolved itself?
Yeah, it was like, we launched a site. It was a deal website, and the whole idea was like Groupon. So it was all about, sharing. If you have found a deal online, and if you share, then you get part of, the deal, because you are the person who's promoting, that particular deal online. And we got a cease and desist letter saying that you can't do that because we invented, deal sharing or something like that, which is, I was like, okay. But I mean, we didn't fight it much because that startup didn't go anywhere. So,
okay.
The startup was pretty much shut down. And that was the end of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's certainly a resolution. Maybe not the one that you were hoping for,
Yeah.
but nonetheless. Renaldo, let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, my real question is kind of similar to Kenya, but just like a build on that is, has it been documented what different enough actually means? Or is this you're just really entering into, can you find a good enough lawyer and can you put enough money behind it to really, drive the conversation? So PetPlate, we have trademarks on, our brand as well as many of our products. And for me, just kind of hearing these stories, really curious where it's been defined, what similar enough or different enough is, and what are the bodies that, that actually define what that means.
No, that's a really great question. And honestly, one that we've never had on Passage to Profit before. So you're an original there.
Thank you.
In more ways than one, right? I would say that really there is no answer in the legal world many times. And it's a balance of probabilities. And a lot of that comes with the judgment of the attorney. So unfortunately, if you're in a situation like that, you want to hire somebody that's seen, thousands of fact patterns and how it's played out. And then based on that, your attorney can say, well, I think if you change this and you change this and you change this, you should be okay, right? And then sometimes the client comes back and says, well, I don't want to change that and I don't want to change this. Well, maybe you change this or change this, you'll be okay. But when you're close, there's always a certain level of risk. And so it's up to the entrepreneur to decide, well, how much risk are we going to take? And in the case of Disney, the risk is low because they have so many resources that it makes it hard for somebody like Evel Knievel's son to fight back. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that was really helpful. And it just kind of brings out another one if I get one more.
Sure.
If that's okay. Does it matter the judge you bring this case to, or is there like a jurisdiction? Like, how does that all work? Like, did Evel Knievel's son, have a choice as to what judge or who would be determining if Disney or had actually used his father's likeness?
So you get a choice of forum, which means that he could have probably filed the suit anywhere Disney does business, or he could have filed suit where he lives, or if there was a company involved, he could have filed suit where his company was. And the rules around jurisdiction and lawsuits are kind of complicated, but he does have a lot of choices. He doesn't have a choice, though, on the judge that hears the case. So once it goes into a court, they have a system that divvies up the courts, divvies up the cases. Some judges are more familiar with intellectual property, so it might be assigned to that kind of judge. But you have no control over what judge hears your case. So, and that is supposedly to lead to some level of impartiality, right? So
Excellent. This has been a great discussion.
yeah, I think so. And I think now it's time to move on to our fantastic guest. Jen Thornton is here, and she's going to be talking about how to build a supercharged team, which every entrepreneurial organization needs. Welcome to the show, Jen. It's amazing that you're here with us. And please, for our audience who are maybe thinking about, starting a company, why don't you talk a little bit about how they can build a team, when they should build a team, and maybe also talk about how you built your business.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm excited to talk to all of your entrepreneurs about creating teams. In the news right now, we're hearing a lot of things around the worker shortage, or, people are leaving traditional jobs and starting their own businesses. I was one of those people myself 4 years ago. So I think it's such a timely conversation to think about how do we think about talent in the workplace, and really recognizing the only way a business gets off the ground is the talent in which surrounds the business. And when I think about, starting your own business, depending on, the structure, what I tell people and what I love to work on with people is taking their business strategy and creating a talent strategy to go along with that. And too often our business strategy is missing that. And so we know how the product's going to get to market. We know who our target audience is. We know what cost of delivery, anything you can imagine around that business is in a business plan. But typically what is missing is who is actually going to do that work. And that's why businesses fail, because we haven't decided how that work's actually going to get done.
I gotta say,
boy, that rings true, doesn't it?
Really yeah. Well, and you do need team members that do the actual work, and it's tough to say who should do what, and sometimes jobs bleed over into each other. And it's also like what I like to do at Gearhart Law is like define the process and then hand it off. Finding the person to hand it off to has been a struggle.
Yeah,
lately,
the creative
right?
part's the fun part lots of times. Well, that's interesting though. So if you're a solopreneur, your team is really the people, like the accountant that you may outsource to, the marketing person you may outsource to, and whatever other the designer, the website maker. How do you create a talent strategy with those people in mind?
So that's how I started. It was just me. Now we have a team, about 10 of us, but there was a day where I opened up my laptop and I said, today I'm going to start a business. What the heck do I do next? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about what my wheelhouse was, what I could deliver. And I had to get really honest with what I don't know anything about. And that is okay as an entrepreneur to say, I don't know anything about how to build a website, or I don't know anything about how to set up my business in a way that makes sense legally, or the taxes. And so when you think of all the stuff that needs to be done and you're a solo, get honest with where you do not have knowledge and really start to work in who you need to bring on to help you with those things. And one of the mistakes I see a lot of solo entrepreneurs do is they may start to bring on one person. And so they think about bringing on one full-time person, and they are like, okay, I need you to do accounting and marketing. And they're asking them to do basically 10 different types of work. And then they think this one person could do it all and do it well. And that doesn't work. We're not that big of generalists in nature as humans.
Right.
And so if you're a solo entrepreneur, you have to break down those items that need to be done that you do not have the knowledge to do properly, and go find experts in each one of those. It's better to find 5 great people who are experts in what they do and work with those 5 people in a small way, versus trying to find one person who you think could do it all, because those people are few and far between.
That's amazing advice. And I have to say, I made that mistake when I was starting out. First of all, I started out doing everything myself.
Yeah.
And
You had a little bit of help.
and Elizabeth, of course, she was there backing me up every step of the way. As well as fact, it was her idea that I start the law firm.
But there were definitely things I didn't want to do or didn't know really how to do. Like he got these big envelopes that were file wrappers back in the day, kids man, that now everything's electronic, but I was like, I've never seen one of those before. What the heck is that thing?
Right.
And
Yeah, and so, but you're right, and part of the thing was I was bootstrapping, right? So,
Right.
to go out and start paying people at the time $100 an hour for 5 hours a week seemed like a lot of money at the time, and I didn't know how I was going to afford all of this, all of the talent, and so if you're strapped for cash, is there a strategy that somebody could employ?
right.
There's a couple of different things when you're having to think about the budget. There is barter, and some people are open to that. I'm an executive coach, and I have an accountant who's a solo entrepreneur. I could have thought about how to barter with her. That could have been an option. And then in today's world, the nice thing is there is the internet. There is YouTube. Verify anything you find on YouTube. You'll find 4 videos that tell you 4 different things on the same topic, and they're all experts. But be very careful about what could crash your business. And those are always anything legal or anything around taxes. And really think about how to make sure you protect some of those things that could be financially a ruin for your organization. Just like our patent, you've come up with an idea, it's really close to someone else's, you don't know that. The legal ramifications of that could take down your business. So really focus in on those core things, and then those other things that you can know enough to be dangerous to figure out, jump in and try to do those.
Well, that's very solid advice. And yeah, of course, I want to amplify that if you're going to create a product or brand, that you at least do a search to make sure that you're clear that somebody else doesn't already have the trademark, or somebody else that hasn't already protected the product. Because after 3 years of work and making progress, you may face legal issues when that person finds out. And it can be pretty destructive. Even if you decide not to practice even if you decide not to protect it, at least you should know whether somebody else has it, right? So Kenya, you look like you have a question.
Jen, just a few things, because you mentioned like worker shortages early on in the conversation, and I know morale has really been shifted since all of this has been going on. Like, what are some ways that, solopreneurs or companies can identify good talent in this time, considering that there is a worker shortage? And what are some ways that they can help teams build back morale, considering everything everyone's going through in the last almost 2 years?
The first thing organizations have to recognize is, why do people work? And so there's 4 reasons. And so there's financial. So check the box. We know most of us have to have a paycheck, so that's part of it. But the other 3 things are in control of an organization to build. And people work because they want to have a connection, a belonging to a group of people or to other people. And so that is in our control and how we build that. They also want to make sure they're part of something bigger than them. And so of a purpose. An organization has the ability to create that purpose and to make sure that people feel like they are part of the mission. And then the last thing, the reason why people work, is they want to grow. Even if they want to be in that same position for 20, 15 years, they want to still grow intellectually, and organizations have power over that. And so I think that's the piece that's often missing is organizations don't step back and say, well, why do people actually work? And am I delivering on that? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to deliver on those things? And then go out and start to think about your employee branding, which is, a great way to create a connection so that candidates feel connected to your organization in the application process, or before they even apply. They may say, gosh, someday I really want to work there because I've been seeing these videos of what it's like to work there, and it's amazing. And so you create that connection. You can, through employer branding, talk about growth, talk about education programs or promotions or someone who's done something great, or talk about the purpose and how an employee connects in with that purpose. And so that's the first piece, is just really stopping and saying, this is why people work, and am I delivering on that?
So Jen, I have a question following from that. So we hear a lot about company culture, and culture is such an ambiguous word, right? So what actually goes into a company culture? And as the leader of a company or the head of a startup, how do you define that? What does it really mean?
So there's two cultures. There's the one on a piece of paper that everyone talks about and says they're supposed to do, and then the culture of reality, and that is how we act. And so the secret is creating a culture with what's on the paper. What we aspire to is the way we act. And it always starts with leadership, and it starts in a place where leaders really understand how to act in a way in which they have laid out. And so say integrity is part of a culture. Well, then if you want to lead with integrity, you have to think about transparency and honesty. You have to think about, how are you going to hear transparency back to you? And I think that is where it gets a hiccup, is, executives sometimes, or founders, think that they are doing that, but they have to be self-aware enough to really think about their actions, and how does their actions create the world that people work in.
Wow, that's just really, fascinating. When obviously you've seen this work, right? You've helped companies put all of this together. What kind of results do you see when all of the pieces are working correctly?
So when all the pieces are working correctly, you see a lot of really great things. One of the things that I love to see when I know the pieces are coming together, you start to see honesty and truth telling in the workplace. And that is always my soapbox. If you do not have a culture in which you can be honest with everyone, if you as a leader can't accept the truth when someone tells you the truth, then you really are starting to damage workplace innovation and workplace problem solving, all of those things you're actually wanting to do, because you create fear of knowledge, you create fear of telling the truth. And so when I find organizations where an executive will say, man, I was in a meeting the other day, and we just hired this brand new coordinator, and she brought up to me that this recent campaign we did just didn't connect with her, and told me why, and man, I really needed to hear that. Then I know that we're starting to create a culture where people are telling the truth, people are involved, they are able to have a purpose and are connected to what's going on around them.
So Jen, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into what you're doing now, into this coaching and working with executives? What was your motivation to do this?
So I am a retailer by heart, and my big dream as a kid was I wanted to work in the mall. And good news, dreams come true, and I got to work in the mall. And I started leading teams at a really young age, and at a very young age started recognizing who I had on duty that night when I was closing impacted my KPIs. I loved waking up to my KPIs every single morning. And just from a young age, I started figuring out that I connected the dots. Who was on my team had a direct correlation to my business results. And so, progressed many years. I did operations. I went into HR. I've been domestic. I've been in international HR. And time again, it was proven that companies or concepts, ideas, new adventures, whatever you're doing, it either is successful or it fails based on the people you put on that project. And so after doing that for a lot of years and helping organizations internally as an employee figure out how to create the talent strategy for the new project, I thought, you know what, I want to have some variety and I want to go off and do it myself. And a lot of things led up to that, but it was those moments in time I'll never forget. I was in a boardroom in Hong Kong. Someone walked in and said something, and I thought, nope, I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm going to do this on my own. I flew home and started trying to figure it out. So that's how I got here today. And, my passion around helping businesses succeed through their talent.
That's really great. Are you happy that you made the decision to cut ties with the corporate organization and go out on your own?
I am. And the reason why is there is this amazing sense of accomplishment, and, my confidence is built. It is hard. Some days I wake up and think, what was I thinking? And then 5 minutes later, I'll get an email from a client and I'm like, oh, I was thinking this was going to be wonderful. And it truly is wonderful. But I am so happy I made this decision. And I've always worked in a corporate environment. So I truly feel like I work with every one of my clients. They don't feel like, a vendor relationship or a consultant relationship. Like I tell them, I'm like, if I join, you're going to have to kind of pretend like I'm a team member, because I will. Like, I will be part of your team. And our clients stay, we've had our very first clients are still our clients today, because we truly do become a team. And there's a purpose of creating this energy through talent and creating better communities. It's the best way to build a better community, is really providing great work environments for people, because how you're treated at work impacts how you treat people when you go home at night. And so here at 304, one of our biggest values is creating better communities. And we do that through the work environment.
Awesome. Kenya?
I mean, you said a whole lot, but I just think what's important to take away is the fact that there are tactics and things that corporations and solopreneurs can use to build effective teams that create, an effective workflow for an organization. But if you had to kind of tie it all together in a bow, what would you say would be the most important thing that a corporation or an entrepreneur can apply immediately that could create some effective change?
Great question. If you are a leader, an entrepreneur, and you want to, create change right this moment, the biggest thing I want you to start to do is to think about how you engage in conversations around information delivery and new ideas. And even if someone comes to you with information that you don't necessarily want to hear or you don't believe it, what I would love for you to say to that person is, I don't see it, but change my mind. Because then you start to enter into this in conversation with your team. You start to learn things. You start to see it from someone else's perspective. And when you as a leader can be open in a conversation and see other people's perspectives, everything will change. You will drive your business in a way you never knew possible.
That's wonderful. And so when you started your business, so you were fortunate in that you had a lot of training and experience already in your field. So tell us about this point when you stepped out of the corporate world and started to build your business. What were some of the steps that you went through, and how did you know when you kind of made it, right? Because when you're starting out, you're working, you're not sure what's going to happen next. And then there kind of comes a point where, well, I think I got something here that's going to work, right?
Mm-hmm. So when I think about that moment that I talked about, where I was like, all right, this is my time to jump. I didn't jump that next day. That might not have been the best decision. But what I did is I created a 6-month plan, and I said, what kind of business do I want? What do I need to do for myself so that I can create that successful business? And there was a lot of different pillars. There were some financial things I needed to come to terms with. Though I had a ton of experience, I enrolled in an executive coaching program and ensured that I went to the best school that I could find, so that I was good at what I wanted to do. I, sat down and really thought about, who would be my first clients? What was my network? And I started reaching out to people very early. In fact, my very first contract I got before I left my corporate job, I didn't have a name, I didn't have anything, but I had started reaching out to my contacts and letting them know this is what I'm going to do. I'd love, to keep you, inside the story and on my journey so that when I launch, you'll know what I'm up to. And so I really put together this, plan. I worked out a very long notice at my job and got them settled so that I didn't burn any bridges there, because they could always be potential clients too. And then I, finally, shut one door and opened this store. So when it comes to thinking about if I've made it, I am a true believer as an entrepreneur. I am where I need to be every day. And some days that's a good place and some days that's not. But if you're always waiting for this like moment where you go, ta-da, I'm here, it probably won't come and you will probably stop growing. And so I just look at it as this is where I'm at and I am better today than I was yesterday. And there's a darn good chance I'll be a little tiny bit better even tomorrow. So I don't know if I'll ever arrive. I don't know if that's who I am.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I mean, I will say, when Elizabeth and I were starting Gearhart Law, we were just so in the weeds all the time and trying. And then there was one point, I guess, we had set a financial goal that if we had generated so much revenue, we would continue on. Otherwise, I'd go back and go back into the corporate world. My journey was similar. I worked at Novartis Pharmaceuticals and then left to start this practice. And it was sort of like we took a step back and say, well, we hit all of our targets. And so I guess it makes sense to continue this journey. So
with new targets.
With new targets. But I agree with you. I mean,
Yeah.
every day is a different day,
Yeah.
and we're always looking for that next footing and next foothold or handhold to get up the mountain, one extra step, and that's what makes it fun.
Right. So Jen, how do people find you? Are you on LinkedIn? I know you have a website. What's your website?
So our website is 304coaching.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Jen Thornton, ACC, and we can always continue a conversation there. And then I also have a YouTube channel, Jen Thornton 304 Coaching, where I post at workshops, videos, all types of different leadership tools that are out there for you.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for being on the show. I hope you'll stick with us for the rest of the hour so we can get the benefit of your experience. But for now, we have to stop for a commercial break. You're listening to Passage to Profit on WOR 710, the voice of New York. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everybody. Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart, our special guest, Jen Thornton. Now we're on to our executive spotlight. Hello, Ashish. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. And Ashish Toshniwal is a CEO of Y Media Labs, and they're doing all sorts of incredible things, a very innovative company. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about Y Media Labs, what you do, and some of the types of businesses that you work with.
Yeah. So what we do is we work with different brands on designing and building their digital footprint, which means that if let's say you're buying something from Home Depot, so we work with them closely on what the app design should look like, how the mobile should function in store versus when you're buying stuff from your living room, and how that whole connected journey for a consumer should be. So we work with a lot of brands, work with Apple, PayPal, Home Depot, a lot of healthcare brands, retailers, banks, so on and so forth.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I think we've all had the shopping cart experience. I find myself spending quality time with my Amazon account almost every evening. Is are there new technologies that are that you can speak about that are related to this journey? Because I think it's really pretty familiar to anybody who's actually ordered anything online.
Yeah, I think more than new technologies, I think there are new trends, because technologies are always there. It's about a lot more about adoption. Like, for instance, the COVID has accelerated a lot of trends which would have happened in the future, but it's kind of like the progress of 5 years is kind of squeezed into 2 years, in a lot of ways. And what we have seen is people, generally young people, Gen Z and the millennials, they were a lot more digital friendly and a lot more mobile first. But now what we have seen is even the older crowd is a lot more tech friendly, going forward, going through the pandemic. Even, for instance, telehealth, which was never a big thing before pandemic. And now it is becoming the preferred way to connect with your doctor, unless, you have something going on where you really have to see a doctor physically. Right. Even shopping groceries, right? Like, it's the trend of like buying groceries from your couch or delivering or, picking up grocery was very minimal before COVID. And now it's kind of the thing.
But Ashish, don't you think, and I know this from experience, that it's gotten a lot easier to use these tech products? I mean, I remember years ago doing a website and trying to get images onto the site. Now I just do a screenshot with my computer and it has a place I can click a button and on it goes. And with all these shopping things too. So and even Zoom, like the tech during the pandemic for Zoom increased amazingly, right?
Absolutely. I mean, before the pandemic, like, my parents would struggle using Zoom, and now it's like Zoom is kind of second nature in a lot of ways. So it's when you say things have gone easier, it's also about like people have been forced to use some of these things which were pretty easy to begin with, but then now they have experienced that it's so easy, might as well, use it in your daily lives.
Yeah, I heard an interest. I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk the other day, and he said that the largest group of Facebook users are aged 55 and older. So if you want to target that market, then go to Facebook, which was kind of fascinating. It makes a lot of sense, but yeah. it was an interesting statistic, because you always think of Facebook really, technology not appealing to an older crowd. But yeah. But I think I wonder if that statistic would have been true 5 years ago, right? And if you couldn't visit your grandchildren in person, you visited them on Facebook, and you became more exposed to the technology.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if you're socially distancing, but the need of being social is still there, technology is the only way to overcome that.
Right. So Kenya, you've lived in digital technology probably your whole life. And
yeah, for sure. And what's interesting is I wanted to get your take though on like the future of brick and mortar, because I like to shop in the store. Like, I'm one of those people that like to touch the actual goods, but I also like to shop online, but have very little patience there if the user experience is poor. But what I've been noticing is that, and Elizabeth, you can attest to this too, because you're a shopper like me, I see less and less people in the store. Like, and I don't know, even on the weekends when I go, like, I just don't see that picking up as quickly as I thought it would return. So I wanted to just kind of get your take there and like how companies are combating that.
Yeah, it's, the future of brick and mortar is definitely going to be very much experience first rather than retail first or transaction first. And a few things, what we are seeing is how companies are using their physical footprint to create a real-time experience, or, things which they cannot see online. Right. Like, and that's I think that's going to be the future. Have you ever gone to a store called Beta?
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
I haven't.
we have one in our mall here. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to that store, so there's one here, in Palo Alto, and that was the first store when they launched. It's like, it's a store where you can experience a lot of these cool gadgets. It's kind of, you can experience, have you heard of the device called Theragun? It's like,
Oh, it's like the thing, the massager, like
yeah.
that were to work out. Yeah.
So now it's a lot more popular, but like 3-4 years ago, that was the first time I saw that. And I was like, man, this is kind of game changer. If you're an athlete, and so a lot of that type of experience, you're seeing there for the first time, and something similar is happening kind of across the board. The new Amazon shopping. So when you enter the physical Amazon shop, you're not just seeing stuff, laid out in the store. You're kind of seeing books which are highly rated already. So when the consumers, they're going through the shelves, they know what is probably the best product out there, what customers are saying, which you don't experience typically when you go to any store.
Right. And I would say, if, for example, if you look at Amazon, they acquired Whole Foods. And so, Jeff Bezos must be thinking that part of reaching customers is going to include some sort of retail experience, right? And
Absolutely.
he's looking for ways to integrate the brick and mortar experience with the online experience.
Yeah.
And but I would just to speculate a little bit, I agree. Only things that you can actually see. And then there's would be some sort of features where the inventory would be very tightly controlled, and it would only be for certain types of products that people really want to interact with. And that's how you would create the experience. So
Yeah.
Jen.
yeah, Jen, can you
Comment or
Comment?
ask a question?
Sure. So I love that you brought up telehealth. One of our clients is a small medical network, and telehealth seemed really, when that started happening, they were scrambling, what does this mean? They're trying to get their physicians and their providers used to doing telemed. And what I love that has come out of that, and what we have found within their organization, is that people are following up with their doctors. They are making an appointment because they know they can jump on and do it from, on their lunch break, and they don't have that drive time. So I really hope that telehealth continues. I hope our insurance organizations continue to support that here in the US, because it is making a difference, and people are seeing their doctor when they need to, because now it is easier. So I love that you brought that up, and I think that's fantastic. So when you think about all of this time that in theory you should save, if you're not driving to the grocery store, you're not maybe driving to brick and mortar, and you're doing so much on these apps, where are people spending that extra time? Where does that time go? And do you know where people then spend that time that they gain back?
Listening to Passage to Profit.
I love that one.
That too. I can tell you how I have personally, so I have 2 kids, 8-year-old and 4-year-old, and I have never spent so much time with them before the pandemic, right? It's like I used to travel almost every week, somewhere or the other. And by the time I would come home, even when I'm here, they're already in bed. And so what I have realized is the quality of life for people who are working from home, who can work from home, who have the luxury to work from home, and who are, who can afford to save time, using this kind of technology, has gone up overall, right? Spending more time with kids, reducing travel time, and even I would say spending time on yourself, the awareness of mental health has gone up so much, even though there was a need even before the pandemic. But I think people are recognizing now that it is important to spend time, on yourself. One of the things we have done at YML is this summer, we could experience that people are working very hard. The lines between work and home is blurry, right? And people are kind of extending themselves. And what we came up with this summer was at 2 p.m. every Friday, we are going to give people off, right? So that they can work on themselves, spend an extra afternoon with their family. And that was a massive hit. And that doesn't mean that we are, asking people not to deliver, what they're supposed to deliver, but we are just giving them the ownership to their schedule a little more. And after that summer, we have kind of continued that thing forever. So that Summer Friday turned into Forever Friday at YML. And that's kind of the trend, we are seeing in general, right? Like happening in the world.
Ashish, you are a TED speaker and you also have a podcast. And you've been on TV quite a bit. And your podcast is Why in the Valley. And I love this tagline, a podcast for those who follow the change, not the plan. So what is your podcast about?
Yeah, so in the pandemic, we as a business, we experienced a lot of change. There's a lot of change in culture, a lot of change in how we just live, right? And every business is going through a change. And so I thought, it would be great to talk to CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs who have experienced this level of change in their company and in their startup, and bring up that story to the world that it's, COVID is the best example of like, plans are great until it's not. And, you just have to follow the change, and people who can follow the change are the people who are most resilient. And the podcast is a lot about bringing up stories on how, leaders have navigated the change in their company, building product, consumer behavior, so on and so forth.
Very good. Jen, I know you had a comment. We still have a little time left on this segment, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to comment about, thinking about that, work from home and brick and mortar buildings and everything that's going on. And I love the approach that you're taking, because it is that integration. And I think that, for so long, we felt like work-life balance was this like, very blocked, like I have to work this time and I have to be home this time. And I think that as employees or as employers, if we can teach people how to integrate, you may work, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., take a couple hours off with your kids and then go back in a couple of hours, and really being flexible and integrating a schedule versus these two worlds that never collide. I think that's a trend that we'll be seeing, but organizations have to do things like thinking about, that schedule differently to ensure that we can create that integration so that it creates a new type of balance, and a balance that works in the way that we live our life today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of giving Friday off. I'd like to take Friday off, quite honestly. So, but I did have one more question, and then I think we have to wrap up for Ashish. What do you see as the future trends now in terms of social and technical trends that you're sort of, aside from not being able to know or predict change with 100% certainty, but what trends are you focusing on now going forward?
I think like one of the trend we are seeing is people are a lot more aware of, their health and how they can invest in themselves, whether it's, using Peloton or using Apple Fitness or, doing such things at home. And, one trend with telehealth is, on one side, yes, it is obviously a lot more convenient to see a doctor from your living room if you don't have to go and see the person, but see the doctor. But on the other side, you are also increasing your touch point with your physician a lot more, which obviously reduces, health risk in the long run, right? Like otherwise, when in the pre-COVID world, like seeing a doctor was a half a day process, including commute time and everything. And because of that, a lot of people were not able to see the doctor when they should have. right? And I feel those things will continue to change, and the technology is making all those things happen.
That's wonderful. We've come to the end of this segment, but we still have a lot of really great content coming up. So listeners, you are listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventors Show on WOR 710. If you missed the first part of the show, we had some great advice for entrepreneurs and some great stories. So yeah, so our podcast comes out tomorrow and you can find us on YouTube as well. Right now we're going to break, so we'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. Our special guest this evening is Jen Thornton. And we just heard from Ashish Toshniwal, who from Y Media Corporation, talking about all sorts of interesting technical pieces and really giving a very interesting synopsis at the end of where we think our world is going. And now it's time for our fascinating iHeartMedia representative, Kenya Gipson. Hi, Kenya.
Hi, Richard and Elizabeth. How are
Tell
you?
us
She's
what.
our media maven.
iHeart representative is okay. I think that's
You mean
funny.
I have to do it again?
No, I think this is funny.
We're beating this like a dead horse. Okay. And
It's all good.
so now it's time for our fabulous media maven, Kenya Gipson, who's also our iHeart representative, and she's going to be putting down her power move.
Oh, thank you for having me on today. I always appreciate you both. And for today, for Power Move, we're going to talk about Ashton Kutcher, who's been making power moves in the tech industry. You know, he's a celebrity, he's an actor, he's been doing all these other things in the world of fame, but he's using his fame and fortune to build up the tech space. So he has actually been partnering with a few other investors, and he has founded Sound Ventures, which he has a co-founder. It's a venture capital firm that helps tech startups, which I thought was very interesting. But many people may not know this about him. And this is where I thought it was a superpower move, where he's actually a product engineer. And he's even collaborated with Lenovo for an app to help them develop that. So I didn't know that about him. I knew he was doing a bunch of stuff in tech, but did not know, in addition to investing, he was a product engineer, rather. So
Wow, talk about being a Renaissance man.
Totally.
Actor, app writer, venture capitalist. What doesn't he do? I mean, plus I hear he's quite the charmer as well. So that's really good for him.
Well, that is, I know that we had somebody on the show a couple of years ago with Muse, which is a technology for meditating, and he was one of her investors. She met him in LA. So very interesting that people have more facets to their lives than just the one, right?
Yeah, I think celebrities occasionally get a bad rap. I mean, there a lot of them deserve it, like R. Kelly, right? But there's also a lot of really smart celebrities too, and who can do more than just act. And so hats off to Ashton. I'm starting to become a fan. So whatever that means. Maybe
we'll put you in a movie.
Trust, you wouldn't want to see me in a movie with Ashton Kutcher, but we would have him on the show. I'll personally reach out to him and see what I can do.
Maybe we can hashtag him on social media. Anyway.
All right. And Elizabeth, tell us about Fireside. How's that going these days?
Well, it's still going. So for those of you who don't know what Fireside is, it's Fireside Directory. It's a video directory of small businesses, and there are a whole bunch of moving parts to it. I've done the interviews of the small business owners and put their things on video. And right now I'm kind of in the tech stage. I did a lot of interviewing stage, a little bit of tech. Now we've written a patent application and filed it about a number of tech innovations that we have around this project.
But we're still not going to tell you.
Still going to keep it under wraps as much as we can. But right now I'm working with the website person because there's a certain way I want the website to look. And that was the challenge, was finding somebody who would just do the back end and use my design, because everybody that's doing websites now, and I've talked to a lot of people doing websites over this past year during quarantine, they all want to start with the branding and make it this whole branded thing. It's like, this is not the same kind of website as like the Gearhart Law website, for instance. If you want to do that for Gearhart Law, that works. This is more, it's different. And that's why it's been so hard to find somebody to do the website, because I have to kind of get what the project is.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain. There's so many moving pieces to it.
That's great. Yeah. And set your business on fire with Fireside. So
I love that. No, Kenya came up with the tagline, igniting connections. I love that.
that's probably
And
better
she
than
helped
mine.
design the logo. She designed the logo too. So yeah, I had some good help there.
Thank you for your patience with that last remark. And it's now time to go on to our presenters. So would you introduce Renaldo?
I would love to introduce Renaldo. If you are a dog lover and seriously really love your dog, I know Renaldo must, because what he's come up with is pretty amazing. And I'm going to let him explain it. So Renaldo Webb with PetPlate.com. Welcome, Renaldo.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm happy just to jump in and tell everyone a little bit about PetPlate. Really starting with our mission, which is to enable deeper, longer, and more meaningful relationships between people and their pets. We do this through exceptional quality dog food, rooted in veterinary science. And it all started just based on my experience as a consultant for a number of years. By happenstance, I was staffed at a variety of pet food manufacturers while I was working at companies such as McKinsey & Company or L. Catterton, one of the leading private equity companies in the world. And I just saw all of the ingredients going into like our dog's food. I was able to look at the packaging and see, they would have a picture of steak or chicken breast on the front of a dog food bag. And that was not what was going into the products. Then marry that with, a little bit of, we were talking about earlier, kind of people's focus on their own health and well-being. Well, if you look at the health and well-being of our pets, it's a little bit of a bleak picture. 60% of them are obese or overweight. Most are dying of cancer. And I was able to, in my own view, kind of correlate the quality of the ingredients and the quality of the cooking processes with the health outcomes of our pets and animals. So I started cooking for one of my dogs. It really helped manage a stomach issue that he had. And after that, I was really convinced that this was very much, the wave of the future. If you look at
so you're telling me that 60% of our pets have cancer?
Or die of cancer. Yes.
Die of cancer. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think that's attributable to the food that they eat?
So when you look at the quality of what's in a standard traditional dog food, it's actually made from what they call the 4Ds. So dead, dying, disease, and disabled animals. So nothing that goes into standard kibble or wet food that you're feeding your dog or cat, for that matter, would actually be allowed to be fed to a human. There's actually someone at a meat slaughterhouse or, wherever this is coming from, usually from, countries outside of the US, where they said you cannot feed that to people for whatever reason, whatever was used to kill the animal or how the animal was actually processed. So that's the primary protein source or meat source that goes into kibble.
Horrible.
Most people don't know that. And I don't.
Why don't we know about this? This is like,
this isn't and this isn't me trying to lead into, oh my God, there are 3 big companies that are evil, yada yada. But at the end of the day, most kibble or traditional dog food is made by Nestle and Mars, and there's been a lot of money in education in terms of this is how you should feed your pets. A lot of people find it convenient, and a lot of people just almost set it and forget it. We're out to change that at PetPlate to help educate customers, let them know about the quality and the benefits of human grade dog food, as well as the ability to personalize their pets' meal plans with fresh cooked meals that are made only using ingredients you'd feed your family at a USDA manufacturer, shipped to you in convenient containers that are easy to portion. We really are trying to make for everyone, we consider our dogs part of our family. We think they should have an experience that's like that. So that's how we've modeled our website. That's how we thought about our customer experience. And that's the level of quality we aim to bring to our customers on a daily basis.
Right. Well, I'm just really shocked about,
Well, I mean, well, think about it. You could buy a 40-pound bag of dog food for $20. What you can't even buy McDonald's for that, right? So think about the quality that must be for them to be able to sell it to you and still hit their margins, etc. So that was what I found out while being a consultant. Decided that's not what I wanted to feed my pets, and realized that similar, you were mentioning earlier about the on Facebook, the largest subset of users now are baby boomers, etc. Well, now the largest owners of pets are millennials and soon to be Gen Z. And traditionally, I think what you've seen is we don't want to use the same brands as our parents. We focus a lot more on health, well-being, and nutrition, and that's also been moving in towards our pets. So there's been a trend of better for you dog food, better for you cat food, a trend of humanization of your pets. And I think that companies like PetPlate are the penultimate of that, and that's where we're shooting for, and that's what we hope pet food looks like another 10 to 20 years from now.
Yes, the millennials definitely treat their pets like children. I do too, but my son.
But our cats are overweight.
Yeah,
So
but,
I mean,
well, they eat cat food. They had something they eat, but
somebody feeds them all the time.
but our son and his wife live on the fourth floor of this apartment complex, and their one dog hurt her leg. It's just a 40-pound dog. So my son was carrying her up and down 3 flights of stairs so she could go do her business. And he got COVID. He'd been vaccinated, so he got a mild case when he got it. He's still carrying this dog up and down the stairs. Oh my gosh. But
he's getting a workout.
Well, they are extensions of the family. My dog Cooper will be at my wedding. Hopefully he won't lose the rings when he's walking it down the aisle. But I don't think 10 years ago you would have seen too many dogs in wedding ceremonies. Now it's kind of a common thing. So when you think about how cultures, etc., have changed over the years, and I think there have been some Harvard studies that have been done. The mere fact of owning a pet means you're less likely to be depressed, can extend your life expectancy. So there's a lot of benefits to having a pet in the household. And I think it's important for us to pay that back towards them.
Sure. I mean, we have a very loud cat that keeps us up at night. So it may be that our life expectancy goes down a little bit.
Well,
but
she's really old. So she's,
But Jen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I am an animal lover. Hopefully you couldn't hear all my dogs barking and making noises in the back. And I just love your mission. I love what you're doing. I am an avid dog rescuer, foster, or whatever. If there is an animal in need, it always finds my front door, especially if it has a large vet bill behind it. It always seems to find my front door. So I hope that you continue to spread the message and educate people on what we're feeding our animals, and it really does impact their health, just like what we eat impacts our health. So I'm going to help spread your mission to all of my dog loving and animal loving rescuers.
Oh, thank you. And I really appreciate it a lot, what you've mentioned in terms of growing and scaling your team. At PetPlate, we're now a team of 20 to 25 full-time. You group in some part-time people, probably closer to 25. We have an outsourced dev shop. So we've been growing and scaling since we launched the business back in 2016. And, figuring out and hiring is definitely a hard thing for startups to do, particularly when you don't necessarily have the funds for, certain higher level executives. So you delivered a lot of really good feedback on your part.
So Ashish, do you have a dog?
I don't have a dog, but my 2 kids, I think they're addicted to dogs.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'll end up with a dog soon.
So Kenya, I know you have a dog. What do you think?
I have a dog, and I also have a sister who's a veterinarian. So we grew up, with a very pet consciousness in our household. And I just was curious, are there any ingredients in the pet food that's out there now that should be red flags for us? Like, I know for humans, it's like no red dye, no red, but is it the same when it comes to pet food?
Yeah, actually, a lot of retailers, for example, Petco just said they're going to not sell dog food, et cetera, that has artificial preservatives, artificial colors, and things like that in them anymore. So a lot of those things are now starting to make their way out of pet food. But unfortunately, when you look at just the overall protein content and where that comes from. It comes from basically meat meals. So you can envision that as basically a protein powder that's coming from the dead, dying, disease, the 4Ds that we mentioned from earlier. And that's, what we're feeding our pets. And unfortunately, that's not as digestible as fresh cooked, real ingredients, et cetera, that we use at PetPlate. So whereas PetPlate, and we've done the testing, would be 90+% digestible on protein, fat, and overall. So that means you're actually getting and absorbing and utilizing the nutrients. A kibble might be in the 60s or 70s, right? Because of that. So that's where I think it's just up to the pet parent to decide what they would like to feed their pet, what better fits with their lifestyle. And at PetPlate, we work hard to continue innovating so that we can address different spectrums of pet owners and what they can afford and like what works for their lifestyles.
So when you talk about cooking dog food, is all dog food cooked, or is this something special that you do?
So most dog food would be cooked, like kibble is cooked like 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So really is zapping most of the ingredients of their nutrients, etc. But at PetPlate, we do a fresh kettle cooking process, very similar to if you were probably trying to make dog food at home on a stovetop. When I started PetPlate, I quit my job in private equity and I was biking around New York City, delivering dog food, making it out of a commercial kitchen. And we've really modeled the larger PetPlate process now, because we've shipped upwards of like 20 million meals to pet parents across the US now. So we have a large USDA kitchen that makes all of our food, and we kettle cook everything fresh. It's in flash frozen and pre-portioned for each one of our pet parents, and then packed in distribution and shipped directly to their door. So we're a direct consumer business. We're starting to dabble in retail. So brick and mortar has been a new experience for us there. But in general, our cooking process follows the same process as if you were making a high-end, human chili. Some people do feed their dogs raw pet food. That's another popular and growing segment in the category, trying to, get back to, ancestral roots for dogs. But a lot of our pet parents, would prefer not to handle and deal with raw meat. So we're a really nice, a middle ground of something that's lightly processed, balanced and designed by a veterinarian, and then convenient.
Renaldo, do you have any plans for cat food? And that's my first question. My second question is, why do my cats hate the food that I cook on the stove for them from like good ingredients? They won't touch it.
Great
The McDonald's phenomenon.
So we are working on cats. The funny thing about cats is they're very, very finicky. So I believe dogs might have 500 taste buds and can only pick up a couple of different flavors. Cats, I believe, actually have more taste buds than humans and are notoriously finicky. Texture is also very important to cats. So there's a lot of research and data that goes into making sure that the right flavor profiles are being added. So at PetPlate, we add all natural flavors to our food. Also, maybe you're not using things that we would use at PetPlate, such as like liver and other things that would be highly palatable to a cat. So if you toss in some of those things, it may help. You have to be careful with this, but they do, like humans, enjoy a little bit of salt. So making sure that there's, the right flavor profile for a cat is sometimes hard to do. So we're doing a lot of work and research on that before we launch products, just because of how finicky they can be. But hopefully in the next, 18 months, we'll have something in the market for that.
Do you add any raw chipmunk? My cats seem to love that.
No, we do not add any raw chipmunk.
So, well, this has been fun, and I think you're really onto something here. I do think it's going to be easier to get the dogs to like it than the cats, because I have tried this for cats, but I'm waiting to try what you come up with. I will certainly try it for my cats.
Yeah, certainly if it's healthier, maybe that means fewer trips to the vet too, right? So it could be,
and less smelly cats.
Yeah,
we have one cat that's a little smelly. Anyway,
she'll be embarrassed that you mentioned that on the radio.
Oh well, she really, you think she would care? She's a cat. Anyway, you're listening.
We'll go home and ask her, see what she says.
So anyway, so for our listeners, if you want to find this dog food, soon to be cat food as well, it's petplate.com. Pretty easy to remember. So we are out of time for this segment, but we have our wrap up coming. I'll go through everybody's websites again. You are listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventors Show with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart, and we will be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart with Passage to Profit. And I am just so over the top this evening because I think we've just had a fantastic show, and I've loved all of our guests, and I've learned so much. And anyway, why don't you tell
Give
us
a little recap about who was here.
why don't you give a little recap about who is here?
That's an excellent idea.
I'm glad I thought of it.
So our guest was Jen Thornton with 304 Coaching. If you need to put together a team that will make your profits soar, because it won't if you have a bad team, then you need to talk to Jen because she's an expert at putting together highly effective teams.
Performance counts in the entrepreneurial world, and it really comes down to the people that you've got and how they work together.
So the number's 304 and the word coaching.com. And then we had Ashish Toshniwal, just a groundbreaking innovator in the digital space, really.
And before we move on, Ashish received an email from Steve Jobs, which must have been very motivating. And so, Ashish, can you tell us what you were doing that caught Steve Jobs' eye?
Yeah, so we started YML in 2009. This was right at the beginning of when App Store was launched. And we were working with the Montessori school to bring teaching, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4 on iPad. And this was like very early days, app number 54 or something. And we launched this app, and in 48 hours, we got this email: I love what you're doing. Let me know how I can help. Best, Steve. And when we got this, we were like, there's no way, this is what we think this is. Like, someone is playing around with us. We exchanged few emails, and, the rest is history. It was definitely one of the things which kept us going. I mean, it took us 3 to 4 years early on to get, a solid footing into the business. And that email was definitely very inspirational.
So you can find Ashish Toshniwal with Y Media Labs at yml.co. Truly an innovator in the digital space for brands. If you want to get ahead of your competitors, go look at his website.
And a future thinker too. So always nice to be in the company of a future thinker.
Right. And we had Kenya Gipson with the P, Kenya Gipson at iHeartMedia.com, did our power move today. And Kenya actually was the one who had the idea for this show, and we have been running with it for more than 3 years since. And she's very creative and has incredible ideas for her clients at iHeart. If you want to be on the radio, which is much cheaper than TV, or you want digital marketing ideas, Kenya's the person to ask.
Right. And I also learned more about Ashton Kutcher today.
From Kenya?
Yeah, from Kenya. So thank you, Kenya, for that. We really appreciate you.
And then last but certainly not least, we had Renaldo Webb with PetPlate, who certainly gave me an education on what we're giving our animals to eat. And
I know, it's
and
kind
why
of
we should change that.
Yeah.
I mean, the 4 Ds, if you didn't hear his presentation, you need to go back and listen to the podcast. Those 4 Ds are kind of gross.
We're going to have to start trapping live animals for our cats.
And the cats already get them themselves. But anyway, his website is petplate.com. If you want to feed your animals, dogs right now, but cats soon, higher quality food than you can buy at the grocery store right now, that's where you need to go.
We want to see the gourmet version too. So it's just not limited to everyday food, but we want those special anniversaries and dog birthdays and everything. We want something special. So.
Exactly. So if you missed any of these wonderful presenters, because everybody here was really good, they'll be on our YouTube channel, they'll be on our podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I would encourage you to hear what they have to say.
Absolutely. And but before we go, we'd like a few comments from our guests in closing. So Jen, what are your thoughts?
What I love about our time together today is all of us have had a different idea, and there was no crossover. There's nothing similar that any of us do, but all of us came together and had this incredible conversation about creating a business that's successful. And I just hope that reminds all your listeners, if you're thinking about an idea and you think, gosh, could it ever be done? Here today, there are 5 different people with 5 different businesses, and it absolutely can be done.
Yeah, that's great. Ashish?
Yeah, I think my takeaway would be that culture is not what you put in slide decks and on your wall. Culture is a lot about the action you take and not just, what you say, but what you do. It's a lot about, the kind of action which is promoted in the company, the kind of action which is discouraged in the company. That's what culture is.
Great. Ronaldo?
Yeah. My big takeaway from this is really think about what's going to make a difference in the future and how you can, add that into your business, whether it's in the products you're thinking about developing, how you're using technology, or what's going to help you protect your company in terms of, the next, event, probably people. So I think a lot of good insights coming out from today.
Kenya, those are tough acts to follow.
Oh my God, you put me last. I'm like, how am I going to stop that? What I will say is I think I would try to find a common thread in the conversations that we have here on Passage to Profit. And I would say the common thread today is sustainability, right? Because we talked to Jen about building a sustainable workplace and a workforce. And then we talked about sustainable shopping experiences with Y Media Labs, and then sustainable eating for pets, right? With PetPlate. So I just always love to have conversations where it all kind of pulls together into one common theme. So that's my takeaway for today.
That was very artful and way to make a silk purse out of a bunch of sow's ears.
Those weren't sow's ears. What are you talking about?
I thought, well, maybe sow's ears wasn't the right term. I don't know. But anyway.
It was a great way to tie everything together, and it was very astute.
Right. Nobody's a sow's ear. So
you calling me
I don't even know what that is. I don't know
well,
what
I'm
that
here
is.
too. I'm a sow's ear just as much as you are.
Well,
Right. Sow's ears together.
You want to call people sow's ears.
It's an old phrase, from the farm. So anyway, well, we want to
farm you grew up.
well, that's another discussion. But thank you, everybody, for listening to Passage to Profit. And thanks to our fantastic, wonderful guests. Really enjoyed being here tonight. And thank you for listening to our audience. You're all, we love you. Keep the texts and the cards and the letters coming in. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank our team that makes all of this possible. Our producer, Noah Fleischman, our program coordinator, Alicia Morrissey, our video editor, chatter boss, and the whole iHeart team.
And to Jen's point, without Noah Fleischman, none of this is possible.
That's right. And he's the real purse maker.
He was a good choice for this team.
He really was.
Yeah.
And so we're signing off for now. So join us for another exciting episode of Passage to Profit coming at you next week. And you're listening to Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart on iHeart Radio, Passage to Profit, WOR 710, the voice of New York.
You sow's ear, you.
Noah, you can cut that.